The 50s and really the whole, like, mid to latter half of the 20th century was this period of time where there was a lot of free-floating dread during that time. We were wondering if we were going to dig up some creature out of the earth that was going to kill us, or some bacteria that we weren't going to be able to fight, if we were going to blow ourselves up. And it was reflected in our stories. Obviously in comic books, also in movies. When you have dreads like that, you externalize them. You create a villain. And so Brainiac was this expression of, exactly the kind of villain we were worrying about at the time. Is some alien going to come down from space and destroy us?
Obviously, all of America was space crazy in the 50s, and science fiction movies were bigger than ever. And Superman really lends himself to the science fiction aspect, since his origin is pretty much science fiction.
The time period when Brainiac first appeared in Superman was very weird in the Superman book. It was reflecting to some degree the TV show. It was a very calmed down version of the character because of the comics code. Every episode would sort of begin with Superman returning from space. There'd be a caption, Superman returns from space, and now I've got to get back into Clark Kent and do this stuff. And it was always a boring story about Lois trying to find out his secret identity. The stories were fairly young, and the stories were fairly innocuous, even in terms of the villain plots, because the villains were very straightforward. Every episode, the prankster would create pranks of some type or another. The Toyman would have killer toys, and Luthor would probably build a giant robot that would go amok, and then Superman would defeat him. They were very simple. They were the same story told over and over again. But when you're 8 years old, that's okay. As you got older, that was not acceptable anymore. That was too simple. And fortunately, Superman adapted with the times. He really started to develop for the baby boom generation that was reading all of this. And as they got older, the character, writing, and art also became more mature.
To me, Superman has always been an exploration of this question of whether science and the future and technology are going to save us or destroy us. Superman is the optimistic side of that when we meet the alien, he's going to be our savior, that as we grow in technological advancement and science and knowledge, that it will be benevolent. And Brainiac is the mirror image of that. Brainiac is the scary, malevolent alien side of that same looking toward the future.
When they came up with Bizarros and Brainiacs, they were coming up with equals to Superman, not necessarily always just physical equals, which obviously Bizarro was, but he was not a mental equal. And Brainiac was a mentally superior to Superman. And then on top of that, being a machine, he potentially was as invulnerable as Superman.
This character immediately resonated. He was different. He was connected with Superman's background. He seemed to be more menacing. And it was an incredible change in the type of villain Superman had in the 1950s, where we never worried about it. Here, for the first time, we worried about it because this character looked like he could actually defeat Superman.
Who is not just operating on global stakes, he's acting on galactic stakes. He's a guy who is destroying planets in his wake. And so it's someone that really rises to the level of the kind of villain you need to be a good challenge for Superman.
So in the hierarchy, it was something that was as out of this world as Superman, and yet was super bizarre. His rules were like, wait a minute, he can do what? He's made this, he's this robot, artificial intelligence, and at the time, it was this extrapolation of computers, which we're just starting to rely on in the 50s, and now all of a sudden, what if they took over? You know, we're very pre-Terminator on all this stuff, but it was like, what if all these things that we relied on sort of took on a life of their own?
Brainiac is kind of the ultimate technological nightmare.
The idea that I had with Brainiac was, if he was a computer, let's make him one. Let's make him a character that cannot be reasoned with, that cannot be altered. Once his program is set, that's it. With Luther, if he's doing something bad, maybe you could say, you know, your sister Lena is in trouble. Maybe you should be worried about your family. And he'll go, damn it, I'll destroy you another time and go off. Doesn't work with Brainiac. Nothing matters except achieving the end of the program. And I found that to be a concept that would be really scary with Superman.
In Marv's version of Brainiac, he needs to find himself a new body and creates this metal skeleton version of himself, this sort of Terminator-looking Brainiac. It's a very resonant image for us.
Pre-Marv Wolfman, what you had with Brainiac was, let's face it, not all that scary. He was a guy with some quartz crystals in his head. He had the short pants on, which showed his green legs, which wasn't all that scary. It was pink with the white trim around. Like, it had the open neck. Like, he looked like he was going to some, like, weird disco out of Star Trek, right? Like, he looked like he'd be the guy who's dancing with Kirk in a disco. It wasn't very scary. Then all of a sudden, Brainiac is now stripped of everything that's basically human. There's a humanoid silhouette, but no more green skin, no more of the weird quartz crystals, no more of the pink swimsuit. All of a sudden, he is this metallic robot creature. And it really drives home the notion that he is alien, and he is mechanical, and he is robotic.
One of the ripest places to look for sci-fi and horror is things that are almost human but aren't. One of our greatest dreads as humans is the loss of our own humanity. You look at what cyborgs, werewolves, zombies, vampires all have in common. It's the theft of our humanity. And so the humanoid version of the robot, Metallo or Terminator, or this version of Brainiac, is very scary to us. We're at this time now where we really are mixing circuitry with the human brain, where neural implants are possible. And while this is exhilarating and creates all sorts of, wonderful possibilities for technology in the future, there's also this terrifying element to it, that what will we become?
He was a scarier looking character. The best element for my money was the skull ship, which was just visually iconic, and you had not seen anything like it before, certainly not in DC Comics.
In this new version of Brainiac that Marv and Ed Hannigan created, Brainiac had a skull ship, a ship that looked like him, that was made in his image.
Skulls are evil. That says bad guy in 2 seconds, and it just looked cool.
That is a scary image to see in the sky. And the idea of doing the skull, it's a skull, but it's his face, and his face is, of course, the stripped-down, skinless version that he was under the green skin.
An alien skull floating in space. It's just a great image, and I think as comic booky as it is, it's almost a warning sign, for people who see it. Like they know death is there for them.
And really, the reason that the ship looks like this, I think, from the point of view of Brainiac's character, is his own aggrandizement. He wants to announce his arrival. He wants to make a big entrance.
It worked on many, many different levels, but primarily the first one is visual and visceral.
The other cool thing is this blurring of telepathy with technology. There's that wonderful Arthur C. Clarke line, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Brainiac is the ship is him, and we have no concept of something like that, Like, I guess the closest thing is iCloud. And we always forget it. And Superman always forgets it. So he's always fighting Brainiac and he's smacking him into stuff, and then inevitably the ship itself reaches out and grabs him, and we go, oh, that's right, he's the ship as well. Like, that's amazing. It ties back into some of our fears of that, of like, what if we're not really controlling the car? What if something else is controlling the car, or the plane, or whatever? So that it plays on all of our fears as well.
But what was interesting with Brainiac and the machine Brainiac was that's not the way he began. If you read the stories back then, he was not a machine. But there was a Brainiac computer.
Good afternoon, Jor-El.
Brainiac, what an unpleasant surprise.
I'm awaiting your data.
In the version of Brainiac that we did in the animated series, we came up with a new backstory for Brainiac. In this one, Brainiac is a computer that is charged with controlling much of life on Krypton. He is born of Krypton. Like Superman, he is Kryptonian, and is very intimately related to Superman's father. When we see Jor-El in the animated series, he's kind of the main guy maintaining and talking with Brainiac.
Brainiac embodied Krypton and wanted to keep Krypton going, and you know, they're both from the same origin. They both have the same father. They both, it's much more Shakespearean, and the characters connect a lot more than, say, Superman fighting Despero, who has no connection. He's another alien. It doesn't really translate or resonate, but you know, there's an instant emotional connection on that Brainiac because Jor-El created it.
What did you say?
Jor-El, where is he?
Level 5, North Wing.
Brainiac says to Superman when they do meet that if I died too, then there'd be nothing left of Krypton, and I saved this legacy. There's even a sense of some kind of possible right thinking in it.
After all, am I not the repository of all Kryptonian knowledge? Should I not be saved above all?
I think in that story, Brainiac definitely has that sympathetic side.
That makes him a multi-layered villain, which is great.
Farewell, Krypton.
Hey, what's going on? Where's Brainiac?
As a writer, you don't want to just put in a mustache-twirling villain, and you wanted to give reasons that the characters did things. He's still 100% a villain, but for the first time, you can follow a thread of why he's doing it, as opposed to, I'm evil, he, he, he.
The way I like Brainiac best is that he is literally just seeking knowledge. He wants to be the entity that has all the knowledge.
They decided to sort of tie it all together later on, and then he suddenly became this machine, this computer character. And that was pretty frightening, because when you're a little kid and you see a character for a couple of episodes of Superman who seems to be human-like, even though he's a villain, and then he turns out to be a cold-blooded machine under all of that, it's a sudden shock.
Will we lose our humanity? Will we just become machine? Will the machines win? This robot image of Brainiac plugged into all of that dread and all that fear, and is really, you know, rich with resonance for us as people.
My take on Brainiac was completely different. My Brainiac takes a lot of cues from what Marv Wolfman put inside his take on Brainiac, which is the Brainiac I first remember reading, actually. And the reason I liked his Brainiac was because it was so cold and alien. And so I wanted to capture that thematic and put it back in there because I thought it was perfect for that character. And I wanted this to be the story where Superman first discovers Brainiac and meets Brainiac, and Brainiac's first time engaging in another being in thousands of years. Like he's been in this weird cocoon mind meld, just being fed through tubes and stasis, learning, absorbing knowledge, just plugging into cities, his drones doing all the work. And then when Superman shows up, it's the first time he wakes up and it opens up and there's all this goo and stuff, and he comes out.
He's a character who obsessively requires order, who needs everything in its place.
He's placed each city according to the planet it came from.
He's not just collecting every city he can. He's then destroying the planet that it came from so that there is no more progress from that planet, no more advancement of information, so he doesn't have to come back and do it again.
Knowledge has been uploaded. Specimen analysis underway.
It's a hive mind, which we've seen on the internet is great for solving problems and for talking about things and for having conversations and getting into, you know, telling me where all the doors are on a video game. But it's a scary thing when you're one man and you're Superman and you're up against it, because all of a sudden, it's a hive mind that knows everything about Superman and knows everything about his culture and knows everything about from planets and planets and planets of information. And all of a sudden, Superman feels very small and outnumbered. And that's interesting.
He never gets weaker, he never gets dumber, he only gets more intelligent, which makes him someone who can outthink anybody.
If you're going to choose to do that kind of story, you really gotta dive in.
Gary Frank, who drew the book, did a great job on the book, and I talked about Brainiac a lot. And really, for me, I wanted to create a villain of, you know, for Superman, he's kind of torn between two worlds: the human world and the alien world that he's a part of. And I felt like Luthor embodied that human challenge really well, like everything wrong in people. That was Lex Luthor. And so I wanted to really make a play at Brainiac and making him everything wrong with aliens. Everything that Superman could be afraid that he would be or was from, I would make Brainiac. So I wanted zero redemption. There's no redemptive qualities in Brainiac for my story.
This is a new version of Brainiac. This is a new explanation for his psyche, a new justification. You can't become everything if the world is still moving forward, the universe is still moving forward. And so, as Zor-El says, it's kind of a bug in Brainiac's logic that leads to his downfall, his inability to deal with real life. As completely foreign to you and me as coming up with a plan like that is, it has its own internal logic. It makes sense. And we need our villains to make sense in that way. And there's, you know, it psychologically holds water. It fits with a psychological profile we understand is in human nature. It's just writ large, or it's expressed in expressed on this galactic scale that none of us ever get to really experience.
There is no way to not think large with him. As I say, I would have him take over every single electronic circuit and computer and everything on the entire planet, because he can do that.
For me, I just wanted to be more human than robot, but have those robotic qualities, the coldness, the alienness that that the Brainiacs I responded to had, but still have the facade of humanity that Clark would have trouble understanding.
It's the best kind of villainy. His point of view is that he's a scientist. He's just doing research. He's learning about the universe and knowledge to preserve these things. Does he care about the ants that he has in his ant farm? Probably as much as, you know, a teenage boy would care about the ants in his ant farm.
I am the knowledge and strength of 10,000 worlds. I am flesh and machine. I am becoming everything.
Where I looked for the themes to play in the movie, in both the big macro supervillain level of Brainiac and the personal level with Superman and Lois, is this issue of whether you can really control life.
Specimen analysis complete. Storing specimens.
I mean, this is a pretty emotional story for Superman in particular. Obviously for Supergirl, it's emotional as well. The fact that there's any other Kryptonians left at all means that this is a personal story for Superman, because he has a chance to connect to his heritage and to his past and perhaps even to family members. And The fact that Brainiac is in the process of stealing Metropolis as well, that's kind of like a double whammy for Superman.
To me, when working on the story, this bottle city in the middle of the movie is kind of the heart of the theme of the story. When we meet Clark/Superman at the beginning of the movie, he's at this point in his relationship with Lois where he's trying to kind of stifle her.
You can't control a living thing without destroying what's alive about it.
It definitely was a cool metaphor to suggest that Superman was being so overprotective of Lois that she might as well have been kept in a bottle.
So it's kind of the same thing Brainiac does with these worlds.
And that is definitely something that Superman learns here, that, you know, while you should definitely care about things, you should not cut them off from their lives.
You can't really bottle something that's alive. You no longer have a real version of that living thing. You've killed it in your attempt to control it.
You don't really know these worlds. You only know your safe, bottled versions of them.
I think that's what makes this a great rivalry and a great iconic story. You know, it can be boiled down to man versus machine, but it's also about, again, points of view.
I think the best characters do that, right? Lex Luthor can be a guy in a business suit, a guy in a lab coat, a guy in a suit of armor, but he still is the same type of villain, a still human villain for Superman. And Brainiac's the same way. He can be a robot, a cold alien. He can be whatever he needs to be, as long as he's reflecting that dark, evil extraterrestrial that that Superman's worst nightmare would be to be.
Brainiac's, without a doubt, in my mind, the best of the Superman villains, because of all the potential he offers.
We all try to create villains, and you try to do something that's not been done before, or a new angle on a character. It doesn't catch on because you, the writer or editor or company, say it needs to catch on. You can't make it catch on. The readers get a vote. But I think more importantly, other writers and artists get a vote.
There is something that we are wired to look at something and feel it right away. And if it speaks to you, even better. There is something very visceral about that, and that's why a character like Brainiac can survive and can grow and can be changed as long as the basics are still there.
You haven't seen the last of Brainiac, I'm sure. Where he'll pop up next, who knows?